Hi everyone, I'd like to introduce you all to Graydon. He's one of the founding members of the Three Tumours charity.
And I'd like to introduce you to Matt Walsh, one of the recent trustees appointed to the charity The Three Tumours.
So basically we're going to run through a little bit of an introduction of what we want to achieve with this briefing. To start with, Graydon is going to tell us about how he founded the charity, the key members of the charity and an overall roundup of what it's all about.
Thanks, Mark. We founded the charity about 2 years ago. Myself, a guy called Ian Hardy, a guy called Richard Stewart, and a guy called Dan Howard, all have terminal brain tumours. The type of brain tumour is a glioblastoma 4, which is ridiculous that the medical profession give it a name that most of us can't pronounce. I think that speaks a lot about how much importance they place upon the patient care experience. So we were all getting to a point around about the 5-year mark at the time, which is very good to get to if you have a glioblastoma, because the average life expectancy is so short. With treatment, it's 12 to 18 months. We were getting to 5 years, probably about 3% chance of getting there. So we were kind of almost referring to ourselves as the 3% club or the outliers. We wanted to do something to celebrate that. And we kind of, over a lot of cups of coffee and a lot of biscuits, we decided that we'd walk Hadrian's Wall, I think, to try and walk off from the biscuits and the cups of coffee, which is walking across the UK, basically. So it started off on the west coast and we were planning to end on the east coast. There's the 4 of us. Some of us were challenged a little bit more in our physical abilities to walk the distances up. So we had to kind of be careful of the distances and the fatigue that we would cover. So we did that and we raised just shy of £14,000 for brain tumour charities. We got some great coverage in the press, local TV and national radio. What we found after that is we all began to be a little bit frustrated with how the money that we'd raised was being spent. The charities that we donated it to all had their own infrastructure, their own wage costs, and we understood that you need to employ people to do certain tasks, but we were just 4 guys with brain tumours. We didn't take even expenses out of the charity, and that's how we thought charity should be. So we decided to set our own charity up very much with that premise. What we raised was focused on our objectives, and we formulated the objectives, which were raise funds for research, to support brain tumour sufferers and their families, to signpost brain tumour sufferers and their families to resources that were currently available, whether that was through Maggie's Cancer Research, disabled badges, or whatever that might be. And finally, just to ensure that we raised awareness to the broader community. So not many people are aware of this statistic, but brain tumours kill more people under the age of 40 and children than any other type of cancer, yet they are significantly underfunded. So of all of the funding that's raised for brain tumours, only 1.375% goes to brain tumours, despite it being the biggest killer of under 40s. So that's where we've got to. Unfortunately, the names I mentioned before, the 4 founders, 2 of them have since passed, which is pretty tragic. So we started to try and rebuild the charity. We focused on other brain tumours to broaden it, so not other than just glioblastomas. I became very aware, as you'd expect, that the charity could never survive if we focused only on those people with such a disease that meant that life expectancy was so short. So we set about trying to find people who, although their lives had been impacted by brain tumours, perhaps they weren't necessarily sufferers themselves, which led us to Mark and several others that had direct experiences with brain tumours, but perhaps, thankfully, in some cases and not in others, they hadn't had them themselves, because I'm sure knowing somebody really well who has a brain tumour is just as painful as having one themselves.
Absolutely. And then I got in touch with the charity. I met Graydon for the first time. I took my dad to one of the meetings at Maggie's. My dad was he suffered for 3 years with glioblastoma. We sadly lost him 3 years ago. And it was the past year where I've really got in contact with Graydon and the rest of the team at the Three Tumours and decided that we want to really do something to move things forward, try and kind of increase the longevity of the charity and really kind of make a difference, not just to the people suffering with the brain tumour, but also the families. The big aim of the charity is to be able to fund a PhD student, so we can really kind of make huge strides in kind of finding a cure for brain tumours. But to be able to do that, we need the platform to raise money. And by doing that, we want to kind of really raise the awareness, at least across the north of England. We're aware that Facebook might be a good platform. We want to really increase the number of followers to at least 4,000. We want to be able to do lots of events, but understandably a lot of us are volunteers and we have other jobs, other commitments. So any events need to be kind of minimal with our interaction. We're also aware of the current pandemic. That's kind of stopped a lot of the things that we had planned. We had runners already lined up for the Great North Run. We were going to plan a ball. All of these unfortunately had to be pulled. But we want to get things running again as soon as possible. So with that in mind, we need ideas that are going to be ahead of the game. We need people to be thinking of what's going to be happening early next year. So when we are allowed out to play again, we're actually off the starting blocks ahead of everybody else. So raise the awareness, events, interaction. We need a revenue stream. We've started the process of creating brands, notepads, pens, hats. We need a system which allows that process with minimal interaction from the volunteers. And that is pretty much where we are.
I think it's important to say that we've turned our hand to a few different types of fundraising. Some of them have been more lucrative than others. Some of them are pretty capital intensive, which we've got capital to invest. We've probably got at the moment more capital than time, but it swings and roundabouts. It depends who's involved and what particular tasks. So I'm really interested to understand more about tapping into some of the thoughts that you might have of things that we could do to raise revenue in particular. But there's nothing more important than awareness, because there are a couple of different facets about that. The awareness can help reduce the impact of brain tumours on people, because you get more checks, or particularly for petitions, people are more aware of the symptoms. I mean, only this week, there's a guy who's just been diagnosed lead singer of the Wanted, or is in the Wanted.
Yes.
That's a glioblastoma 4. I'm sure him and his family are currently reeling and coming to terms with the fact that he's got the diagnosis of 12 to 18 months to live.
So that is where we stand. We need awareness, we need events, we need merchandise, all of this to fund a PhD at some point to find a cure for this awful disease. Amongst all that, we want to provide an invaluable service to help families. That is paramount. I'm sure I speak for Green as well that our phones are always on. Our door here is open. If you need to know anything else, all you've got to do is reach out. Thank you.
Thanks very much for considering us as well.